Done. So today we'll start from the world wars. Yesterday we discussed about unification of Germany and Italy. Both of them they got unified in 1870, 1871. And from here, the next phase is going to be very, very crucial. Till 1914, large number of such circumstances will erupt, which will lead the whole world towards a war, the World War. Now let us try to understand what happened actually. One country which was now very happy was Germany. Okay, Germany, its unification was declared in the Hall of Mirrors. जितना pomp and show हो सकता था वहां पे इसको करा दिया गया in the Hall of Mirrors. And what's the name of the place? Versailles. Now this was bound to have a big impact on the psyche of French, and France took this decision that it will seek a revenge in the future. It will seek a revenge in the future because Germany defeated the France in 1870 Battle of Sedan, imposed Treaty of Frankfurt 1871, and then it was about the Versailles, the royal level of the royal palace, which was now broadly brought under the German influence. Because of this, the next 40-45 years, this is the phase of international anarchy. Phase of international anarchy. There was no systems as such, no organization which could control one power or the other. So n number of things were being done. Let us understand how did it happen. First, Germany started the process of creating alliances. Germany realized that एक ही चीज है that we have to keep France isolated. You would have seen in your life, अगर कोई बहुत ही imposing सा इंसान है तो अकेले तो आप जाके लड़ाई करोगे नहीं उससे. You will seek support from 2, 3, 4 people, and then only you think about fighting. Since Germany was now very strong, only France would not be able to defeat it. But now, France would try to create friendship. And this is what was to be taken down by Germany. And this was the policy of Bismarck. Bismarck was now pursuing the policy of isolation of France. Let us see how he would create these system of alliances. The first system of alliance it became fruitful in 1879. He created dual alliance. The dual alliance was now signed with Austria. Austria-Hungary became a friend of Germany, and with this alliance, in the future, if there was any war, the both of them would fight it together. This is the genesis of how the alliance will be formed during the First World War. Both of them would be on the same side in 1940. Second, in 1882, you see the creation of Triple Alliance. Why Triple Alliance? Because now Italy also wanted to be part of it. Italy now wanted to be part of it. 1887, he signed a treaty known as Reinsurance Treaty with Russia. It means that Russia would ensure neutrality if any war breaks out in Europe. So can you see all the major powers now they are befriended with whom? Germany. Germany got a friend of Austria-Hungary, 1879, 1882, is the entry of Italy, and 87 they also have now have Russia. Challenge will start from 1888. Why? The previous king would die. The aggressive Kaiser William II, he would come to power. 1888, he came to power. The moment he came to power, it could not lead to any kind of good relationship with Bismarck. So Bismarck resigned. Bismarck, he was the master of these kinds of system of alliances. और जैसे ही ये कहानी खत्म हुई in 1890, this will lead to chaos in whole of Europe. Till the time he was in power, he knew how to maintain alliances. He was a diplomatic champion. He knew what to do, what not to do. Now after 1890, things are now going to go other way. Let us see how. Like this treaty of 1887 with Russia, this was required to be renewed in 1890, but this was not renewed by Kaiser William II. He said, our interests with Austria-Hungary and Russia are now colliding. So we will not further sign any treaty with Russia. The first alliance, on the other hand, will be of Russia and France. फ्रांस को पहली बार एक दोस्त मिल गया अब कि भाई चलो अब कुछ करते हैं. Let us do something now. Now France was now out of isolation. Isolation was broken. It's very, very important. In 1894, first time we see the creation of an Russia was now not having any alliance with Germany, which was to be renewed in 1890. That was not done. It was not done by Kaiser William II. France was looking कोई तो एक दोस्त मिल जाए लेकिन they were isolated. They could not fight on their own. So they had to eventually wait for someone else. So finally, who landed up? France. For France, it was Russia. So 1894. The next page is going to come in 1904. The two most severe enemies, British and France, will sideline all their issues. They will sideline everything, and they will also create an alliance. And by 1907, even Russia would become a part of it. And this is how what we know as Triple Entente was created. Triple Entente was created. So by 1907, on one hand we had this Triple Alliance. On the other hand, we had Triple Entente. So this alliance system played a very important role in the outbreak of the First World War. Look, there's a difference between war and World War. दोनों के बीच में difference होता है, ठीक है? There's a difference between war and World War. Alright. What's the difference between them? Yes, so in war it could be like this, suppose India and Pakistan. But when we say World War, at least substantial level of countries they should be a part of it. है ना? तो एक पूरी की पूरी एक बड़ी लेवल की होती है, तभी उसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? वर्ल्ड वॉर बोलते हैं. ठीक है. So by 1907, the structure was against the whole of Europe, but still spark was required. अभी तक कोई स्पार्क नहीं था इन दोनों अलायंस के बीच में लड़ाई करने के लिए. Spark was not there. So this spark was now required. Okay, let us see how this spark is going to come in. So the spark is going to erupt because of multiple things. that we can create from the BPT also. Okay. Spark is going to arise because of multiple things. Yes, the first major issue was the Morocco crisis. What's the meaning of this Morocco crisis? Morocco, all of you know, it's a country in Africa, northwest part of Africa. Morocco was naturally under the control of France. Okay, but its resources were also open to other powers. Okay, like an arrangement was created. However, this was not liked by Germany. Germany was not happy with you. All of you know there are two major powers, Germany and France, always fighting against each other. That's why they wanted a European conference. Okay, they wanted a European conference to discuss the issue of the Morocco. This conference happened in Spain. Conference happened in Spain. This is known as Algeciras Conference. It happened in Spain in 1906. But things became very bad for Germany because Britain sided with France. They said we are going to support France on this. Okay, Germany does not have anything major to do in Morocco. This is known as the first Morocco crisis. Similarly, there was second Morocco crisis. This is also known as Agadir crisis or second Morocco crisis, meaning stay. So what happened here again? France became active in Morocco and Germany, they sent a gunboat to a place known as Agadir. Again, this is known as Moroccan crisis number 2. So Britain and France, they were now fighting over colonies in which continent? Africa. Africa was one source of the spark that we discussed. That how would the spark come into the picture? The next big spark is going to come in the eastern part of Europe. Eastern part of Europe, where Ottoman Empire was declining. And the first major crisis which happened, it is known as Bosnian crisis. So why Bosnian crisis happened? Let me just tell you. In 1878, a treaty was signed. This is known as Treaty of Berlin. As per this treaty, Bosnia was part of Ottoman Empire. It was part of Ottoman Empire, but it was governed by Austria. So very complicated kind of structure was there. तो territory आपकी है लेकिन govern आप करोगे. मतलब क्या system है समझ नहीं आया. This was bound to create conflict today or tomorrow. मतलब suppose आपका घर है लेकिन चीजें मैं देखूंगा सारी. No, that it doesn't happen like that. That was the challenge which we see in Bosnia. What happened in early 1908? A revolution was starting in Turkey, known as Young Turk Movement. The Ottoman Empire, largely the major successor of that is Turkey. The Young Turk movement was starting in Turkey at this point of time. That's why what Austria did, it captured Bosnia, completely made it a part of itself. Even though Austria-Hungary did not have any similarity with Bosnia. Now, Bosnia was a country which was part of a group known as Serb or Slav population. Slav population. They used to call themselves Slavs. And two major countries who used to support the Slav population. One was Serbia and their leader used to be Russia. Russia also used to call itself as Slav and Slav, the champion of the Slav, somebody who will protect them. So when Bosnia was captured in 1908, by whom? Austria. Serbia said there should be a conference just like Algeciras conference. The Algeciras conference was happening over Morocco. But इस टाइम पे किसी ने सुनी नहीं. तो सर्बिया को ये चीज समझ में आई कि नो बडी इज टेकिंग सर्बिया एनी सीरियसली, भाई आपकी कोई औकात नहीं है, आप कुछ भी बोलोगे नथिंग इज गोइंग टू हैपन. The next big challenge which came in the eastern part of Europe, this is known as Balkan War. Two wars happened, one in 1912, the other in 1913. Here, all the country came together and they attacked Ottoman Empire. They attacked Ottoman Empire. The second Balkan War, Bulgaria started the war versus Serbia. But Serbia was having the support of everyone. So Serbia emerged as a very successful country out of these Balkan wars. And who was enemy number one for Serbia? Austria. Because Austria was the country which was controlling Bosnia. Now they would start something which would affect the interest of Austria. This is how the spark was created. Already alliance system was there by 1907, but without the spark, it was not going to work. This work was very, very important. Okay, this work was very, very important. So what happened eventually? Austrian legacy was to be carried forward by a person by the name of French Ferdinand. He was the heir to the throne. The next राजा बनने वाले थे French Ferdinand. And French Ferdinand was having a tour of Bosnia. अब आप सोचो दिल किसका टूट रहा था बोस्निया देखिए. It was Serbia. कि मतलब कहीं और का टूर कर लो, टूर भी कहाँ करना है, बोस्निया का करना है. First you have captured it and now this you want to humiliate us to show कि भाई we are now going to go in Bosnia. So in Bosnia is a place known as Sarajevo. Today also it's the capital of Bosnia. Okay? In Sarajevo. So that's why here a person by the name of Gavrilo Princip, he killed French Ferdinand. Okay? This completely created anger in Austria. Austria gave an ultimatum to Serbia. Ultimatum was given कि भाई जल्दी से हमारी ये सारी डिमांड्स एक्सेप्ट कर लो. If you will not accept our demands, what will happen? Eventually we will start a war. This murder happened on 28th of June. 1 month was given for accepting the ultimatum, and that ended on 28th of July. On 28th of July, Austria-Hungary attacked Serbia. And this is how we see the beginning of the World War. Let us see how it's going to become a World War. It was a specific part which was now annexed by Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary was a very large empire. छोटा-मोटा empire नहीं था वो. ठीक है? It was not a small, it was a big empire. अगर आप देखोगे, can you see this clearly? दिख रहा है visible? So see, this is Austria-Hungary. ठीक है? This is Austria-Hungary and this is Serbia. This is Serbia. And this is the area which is known as Bosnia. This was captured by Austria-Hungary. Now this is clear? Okay? Crystal clear? So Bosnia was captured by Austria-Hungary and this instance Serbia. Okay? So this is how the challenge began. But as all of us can understand, they attacked Serbia. Serbia was having the support of Russia. Russia mobilized its military on 29th of July. Once this mobilization, this attack was on 28th July. By 29th, even Russia entered the war. Once Russia came into picture, Austria-Hungary had the support of Germany. Germany declared war on Russia by 1st of August. Okay, the war was declared by 1st of August. The moment Germany came in, Germany never comes in with small wars. Germany also attacked Belgium. Belgium was enjoying neutrality, and there was a specific provision that if the neutrality of Belgium is violated, then who will attack Germany? Britain. This brought Britain also into the war, and Germany attacked France. So naturally, if you are going to attack, you will become a part of the war. Like this, we see the creation of an alliance. ठीक है? See, देखो लड़ाई करने के लिए आपको स्ट्रेटजी बनानी पड़ती है, ठीक है? जो ये वाला एरिया है ना, दिस एरिया, दिस इज लो लैंड. क्या बोलते हैं इसको? लो लैंड. ज्योग्राफी में पढ़ोगे इसके बारे में, ठीक है? सिंस दिस इज लो लैंड, तो अगर आपको फ्रांस को अटैक करना है, सबसे अच्छा तरीका कहाँ से है? यहाँ से. इट्स नॉट ट्रू हियर. यहाँ पे बीच में माउंटेन, तो आप एनर्जी, आप हिमालय होके जाओगे या लाहौर होके जाओगे? दैट्स द ऑप्शन. दैट्स द ऑप्शन. यू अंडरस्टैंड माय पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू? So since this area is lowland, army movement is very easy, and that's why once this was done, naturally Britain also came into the picture. Okay, so this is how it eventually began to a world war. Bulgaria and Turkey also supported these central powers, Germany as well as Austria-Hungary. They had their own regions. Like Bulgaria was at war with Serbia in the Balkan War, and Turkey, this was effectively affected by the Serbia. So both of them, they came towards Germany and Austria-Hungary. And once Britain came into war, Britain also brought all its territories, and one of that territory was India. That's how it became a world war. All these countries, they were not just single countries. They were not single countries. Britain and France were having the biggest empires across the world. So once the World War I started, it brought all the colonies of Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and even Austria. So this is how it eventually turned into World War I. ठीक है? when हम वर्ल्ड वॉर की बात करें, ठीक है, वन थिंग विच यू नीड टू रिमेंबर इज दिस, दैट इट हैड many phases. तो कोई एक आधा फेज नहीं है, बहुत सारे फेज फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर के. Starts from 1914, it continues up to 1918 when Germany surrenders, and finally in 1919 we see the signing of the peace treaty. ठीक है? सबसे पहले जो है, you see war on the western front. Okay, Belgium protested but couldn't stop Germany. France failed to halt German advance, and they were within 20 miles of Paris. Okay. Then on the eastern front, it was Russian offensive. Russia advanced into east part of Prussia, but it suffered a very big loss at Tannenberg. So Russia, it was defeated by the Germans. Then two front war was started. The struggle to consolidate victory due to resource limitations. Then we have this Battle of Marne. French counter-attacked and Germans were pushed back. Later on, British Naval Command captured all German territory except German East Africa early in the war. Then the most important part of the warfare, that is known as trench warfare. Trench warfare, all of you understand? बड़ा गड्ढा खोदते हैं, ठीक है? And they take it for kilometers so that anybody cannot come from. Like this, armies enters along 650 kilometers. Okay? तो सोचो 650 किलोमीटर छोटा मोटा नहीं होता. यहाँ से स्टार्ट करोगे जोधपुर तक, ठीक है, फ्रॉम दिल्ली ऑल द वे अप टू जोधपुर, वो भी लगभग 550 पौने 600 के आसपास. फ्रंट फ्रॉम इंग्लिश चैनल टू स्विट्जरलैंड, रिजल्टिंग इन ए प्रोलॉन्ग stalemate, and you cannot fight because of this French warfare. Next, we had this battle of Somme and Verdun, which eventually put British in command, okay, for certain time. Battle of Jutland. Then one important thing happened in Russia. Russia faced a revolution. Okay, this was the time when the Tsar was the king of Russia. He abdicated the throne, and once he abdicated the throne, Russia went out of the First World War. By October, we see the victory of Lenin. Lenin was able to win. This is known as the October Revolution. After winning in 1917, by 3rd of March 1918, they signed this Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. This was a treaty signed by which Russia signed peace treaty with Germany, and certain territories were exchanged for that purpose. Okay, these areas of Latvia, Lithuania, this were now given to Germany. This is known as Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Then American entry. Why American entry? American entry happened because of sinking of the ship known as Lusitania sinking. This was a big ship, in fact, the biggest passenger ship at that point of time in the world. It has the capacity of more than 1,000 people. This was sunk by the German boats, German U-boats, and in this, around 128 Americans died. So this event happens in 1915. Then US declares war in 1917. Why the gap of 2 years? Why the gap of 2 years? Because the Americans still thought that we can stay out of war. They were supplying the weapons to these countries who were fighting war. But later what happened, a plan was now foiled. Mexico wanted to enter the war. Mexico wanted to enter the war. Now this was a big challenge for USA. That's why USA thought, let us do one thing. We will now start the war in favor of Allies. So we see the exit of Russia and the entry of USA. So it was somehow compensated. It was somehow compensated. Finally, Austria signed an armistice by 3rd of November. Okay, Charles signed armistice. Germany, Bulgaria and Turkey surrendered, leaving Germany isolated. And finally, on 11th of November, Germany signed surrender. In fact, during the First World War, one more thing was very crucial. Spanish flu. We had the COVID era. In fact, फिर से COVID फैल रहा है. Yeah. So there was Spanish flu, which killed millions of people during the First World War. Many German camps had Spanish flu. These leaders, as well as the soldiers of Germany, they were affected by this to the very ultimate level. So many people, they were now ready for giving up the cause of warfare. By 1918, we see the surrender of Germany, and this will lead us towards the what is known as Paris Peace Conference. So this is going to happen finally, okay, in 1919, and this peace treaty was initially to be based upon 14 points of Woodrow Wilson. Now, Woodrow Wilson, he was the president of America, and he gave these 14 points. कि भाई हम क्या क्या चीजें करना चाहते हैं फ्यूचर में. Can you see number one? It is open diplomacy, because whenever diplomacy stops, it leads to war. So they wanted a good level of diplomacy. Number two, they wanted freedom of seas. They should not be restricted. Number three, free trade, arms reduction, fair colonial settlement, self-determination for Russia, independent Belgium, France territory, Alsace-Lorraine was taken in the War of 1871. That's why now it was given back to France by Germany. Adjusted Italian borders, self-determination for nationalities everywhere, independent nation in Eastern Europe, then development for Turkish people, independent Poland with free access, and finally creation of League of Nations. So this is the 14-point formula. But the problem was that the peace treaty which was signed on 28th of June 1919, it was not signed on the basis of all these principles. In fact, it was a very scathing kind of a treaty which was now putting each and everything, every responsibility was put on Germany. And Germany was blamed for the World War, even though that was not the truth. All of you can see this. Why this was not the truth? Why Germany should not be held responsible for First World War? You tell me. Why? Why Germany alone should not be considered responsible for First World War? सबसे पहले लड़ाई किसके बीच में हुई थी? ऑस्ट्रिया हंगरी एंड सर्बिया. These were the two major powers. कहीं भी जर्मनी का कोई पास कुछ काम था नहीं था. It was Austria-Hungary who was the first aggressor. So if you want to establish responsibility, first person who will be given responsibility is Austria-Hungary. Second, role of Germany also comes in, because Germany gave this blank check to Austria. It told Austria, you can do anything and will still support you. कि भाई भाई है जो होगा देख लेंगे. That's the thing which was done by Germany. But other powers also were responsible for this. The first mobilization of army was done by Russia. Russia did the mobilization. So Russia should also be held responsible for First World War. Britain never clarified that if Belgium is going to be, this neutrality will be affected, then it will take it as an act of war. That was never clarified by Britain. So the First World War should not be pinned only on Germany. तो ये मैं आपको इसलिए समझा रहा हूँ, थोड़ा सा ट्रिकी चीज है, इट्स नॉट दैट स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड थिंग, बट ये समझना शुरू करना पड़ेगा। ऐसे क्वेश्चंस आपके जीएस में भी आए हुए, 2015 में क्वेश्चन आया था, डू यू थिंक दैट जर्मनी वाज रिस्पांसिबल फॉर 2 वर्ल्ड वॉर? वहां पे आपको यही लिखना है, द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर में इट वाज नॉट द ओनली एक्टर, देयर मैनी अदर प्लेयर्स आल्सो। अगर ब्रिटेन और फ्रांस नहीं होते, मान लीजिए अगर ब्रिटेन भी नहीं होता, तो वर्ल्ड वॉर कभी भी नहीं बनता। दैट इज देयर, ठीक है, तो ये चीज ध्यान रखेंगे, ठीक है। क्वेश्चन इसलिए पूछ रहा हूँ मैं आपसे, आपको सोचना सीखना पड़ेगा। इन ऑप्शन यू हैव टू लर्न, ऑप्शन में सिर्फ इजी क्वेश्चन नहीं आएंगे कि व्हाट आर द फैक्टर्स फॉर फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर, दे विल आस्क यू दीस काइंड्स ऑफ क्वेश्चन आल्सो। इनफैक्ट लास्ट ईयर जीएस में एक क्वेश्चन काफी डिफिकल्ट आया था लास्ट ईयर, डू यू थिंक दैट द फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर was fought for the preservation of balance of power? Do you think that the First World War was fought for the preservation of balance of power? और ये सुनने में ऐसा लगता है इतनी इंग्लिश कहाँ से आई, इतनी अंग्रेजी का करेंगे क्या, ठीक है, बट ऐसे क्वेश्चन पूछे जाते हैं, बट क्लास में डिस्कस करेंगे आराम से, जब बाद में पीवाईक्यू वगैरह देखेंगे तभी उतना अंदर नहीं जाएंगे, बट इतना समझ में आ गया बेसिक तरीके से। हर किसी के साथ अलग अलग ट्रीटी साइन की, सबसे प्रोमिनेंट ट्रीटी थी ट्रीटी ऑफ वर्सेल, किसके साथ साइन की गई? जर्मनी, ठीक है। ऑस्ट्रिया के साथ साइन की गई ट्रीटी ऑफ सेंट जर्मेन, हंगरी, स्वेनन, बल्गेरिया ट्रीटी ऑफ न्यूली, एंड फाइनली विद ट्रीटी ऑफ सेवरेस was signed with Turkey. So with every country, certain treaties were signed. Okay, the treaty with Turkey, though accepted, failed because of resistance of Kemal Pasha and his followers. तो वो बंद हो गई। बाद में न्यू ट्रीटी was signed, Treaty of Lausanne by 1923. Now, the biggest, the most controversial treaty in the whole of the world history is Treaty of Versailles. इसने जर्मनी की कमर तोड़ दी थी, and that's why Germany came out with even more weapons, and Hitler was responsible for the Second World War. तो देखिए कुछ प्रोविजन समझने की कोशिश करें। Number 1, they gave back Alsace-Lorraine to France. That was the first one. This was the territory. Second, there is a place known as Saar. This is in Germany. तो भाई फ्रांस ने कहा जैसे हमारा एल्सेस लॉरेन लिया था तुमने, हम क्या लेंगे? सार लेंगे। तो ये कुछ रिजॉल्व करने नहीं जा रहे थे, इवन दे वर फाइटिंग ड्यूरिंग द साइनिंग ऑफ दिस पीस ट्रीटी। इनफैक्ट जर्मनी को बोला गया था अगर एक बार भी हमने सुना कि तुम नहीं साइन करने वाले हो तो फिर से वॉर स्टार्ट कर। जैसे बात साइन घर पे होता है ना, घर पे होता है ना कि भाई पेरेंट्स पहले बोल देते हैं कि तुम्हारी चलेगी ही नहीं, बोला तो जो मिल रहा है ये भी नहीं मिलेगा, ठीक है। सो दिस इज हाउ जर्मनी वाज ट्रीटेड, completely bullied by all these powers together. So, बट देखो जब भी पीस ट्रीटी साइन करी जाती है उसको इस तरीके से साइन करो फ्यूचर में वॉर ना हो, ठीक है। लाइक अब 1971 का वॉर पता है, इंडिया पाकिस्तान, व्हाट हैपेंड इन दिस, वी सी द लिबरेशन ऑफ बांग्लादेश, ठीक है। इंडिया बहुत अच्छी फेवरेबल पोजीशन में था, 93,000 प्रिजनर्स थे हमारे पास, इंक्लूडिंग द जनरल ऑफ पाकिस्तान। चाहते तो हम बोलते हमें दो पीओ के आज, नहीं तो आज के आज मार देंगे सबको, बट प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है इससे, इन द फ्यूचर पीस वुड नेवर हैव बीन। तो इंडिया को उस टाइम पे थोड़ा सा बड़प्पन दिखाना पड़ा कि इनका एक हिस्सा जा रहा है वही बहुत है, लेट अस नॉट एग्रेंडाइज द मॉन्स्टर, बिकॉज दे डू नॉट हैव सिविलिटी। पूरी की पूरी गवर्नमेंट कौन चलाता है? आर्मी। तो इट्स बेटर इफ वी लीव इन, थोड़ा सा दुख के साथ छोड़ दे। अगर मान लीजिए उनको हम बंदी बना के आज तक जेल में चढ़ाते तो 90,000 प्लस सोल्जर्स, हो सकता है बाकी पावर्स भी आ जाती सबका। तो कभी भी जब भी पीस ट्रीटी साइन की जाती है ना आफ्टर एनी वॉर, तो थोड़ा जल्दबाजी में करनी होती है, लेकिन बड़प्पन के साथ करनी है, विद मैग्नानिमिटी। इफ यू आर क्रूअल एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम, इट्स गोइंग टू क्रिएट फर्दर चैलेंजेस इन द फ्यूचर, दैट हैज बीन द ट्रुथ। हमेशा यही हुआ और जर्मनी के साथ भी यही हुआ। तो जर्मनी फॉर द नेक्स्ट 15 years, a part of them was taken, the Saar Valley. उनका जो ईस्टर्न एरिया था दैट वाज टेकन अप एंड इट वाज कन्वर्टेड इनटू पोलैंड, ठीक है। नेक्स्ट, ऑल द ओवरसीज पोजेशन, जितने भी अफ्रीका के अंदर इनकी टेरिटरीज थी, दैट वाज आल्सो टेकन अवे। नेक्स्ट, बस यही नहीं, राइनलैंड एरिया, दिस इज द बॉर्डर ऑफ फ्रांस एंड जर्मनी, दिस वाज डीमिलिटराइज्ड। को डीमिलिटराइज कर दिया, मतलब आप यहाँ पे आर्मी ला ही नहीं सकते, चुपचाप अंदर की तरफ बैठे। तो ऑल दीज वर टेरिटोरियल चेंजेस, ठीक है, ये सारी चीजें थी, जितने भी ये एरियाज थे विच वर टेकन by Germany, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all of them were made independent and Poland was created. Military भी बहुत गजब फीचर्स लेके आए ये लोग, that you can only have an army of 1 lakh. That was not enough. No submarine, no military planes, etc. allowed. And they also prohibited the union of Austria and Germany. Why? If we see the 14 points of R. Woodrow Wilson, he says principle of self-determination should be accepted. अब ये दोनों कंट्रीज कौन सी थी? जर्मन थी, पर फिर भी एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया गया, because they thought they will further become strong. That's why. And to make it more worse, Germany was saddled with what? War guilt. तुम्हारी ही रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी। और ये क्यों किया गया था? बिकॉज ताकि आपसे क्या मांग सके? पैसे। पहले आपको एक्सेप्ट कराया जाएगा, गलती की जी, हाँ जी गलती, ठीक है, अब भरपाई कर। तो 6.6 बिलियन पाउंड was now asked as war reparation. जितना भी खर्चा हुआ है इस वॉर के अंदर, सारा का सारा कौन पे करेगा? जर्मनी। जर्मनी will pay it. What do you think after this? The German people will love French people, or they would love the other powers who are making the settlement? आपने टेरिटरी ले ली, आपने पैसा ले लिया, आर्मी छोड़ी नहीं, ठीक है, जो मन चाहे हमारे साथ कर रहे हैं। What was going to happen? It was going to lead to rise of another wave of nationalism. And the next wave of nationalism was not going to be feeble. The next wave of nationalism was going to be a very strong wave. And as all of us can understand, the next wave was led by whom? It was led by Hitler. And that's why it became a very, very strong wave. Okay? It became a very strong wave. Alright? ठीक था सर? हाँ। मुझे चुप चुप के अंदर घुसने में डर लगता है, कुछ तो हुआ है। हाँ जी। चलो वो तो दैट्स असाइड, उसको छोड़ देते हैं। बट अभी आप जितना पनिशमेंट दे रहे हैं, एक होता है ना जस्ट वॉर थ्योरी सुनी? व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ जस्ट वॉर? वॉर शुड बी फॉट इफ इट इज एब्सोल्युटली नेसेसरी। एंड जब वॉर आप लड़ते हो तो उसमें आपको कुछ एक प्रिंसिपल्स फॉलो करने पड़ते हैं कि भाई यू विल नॉट हर्ट द सिविलियंस, ठीक है ना, आप प्रोपोर्शनेट करोगे लॉस, डिसप्रोपोर्शनेट नहीं होगा लॉस, ठीक है। तो ऐसे ऐसे है। प्लस जब आप पीस ट्रीटी भी साइन करोगे तो आप थोड़ा सा निर्दयता नहीं दिखाएंगे। But with Germany, everything was done in the extreme. That's why the Germans are going to rise, and not with a very easy level of challenge, a very tough challenge. Okay. Then, in between this First World War, we also had one revolution, that is known as Russian Revolution. Let us try to understand this. Why is this revolution going to happen? So the ruler at this point of time was Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Russia was the most backward country. In fact, the causes of Russian Revolution and the causes of French Revolution are broadly same. French Revolution में क्या causes पड़े थे? One basic cause of the French Revolution was privileges, the system of privileges, long term. No land reforms were done. Okay? Plus, the king was weak. Here also, Tsar Nicholas II, he was weak. He lost war to Japan 1904-05. He promised that he would create democratic institutions. He created Duma in 1905, but powers were not given to it. Okay? Then land reforms were not done. There was shortage of basic goods. In fact, he took the worst decision to participate in the World War I. This is going to be the worst decision. This was the worst decision. Why? Already Russia was not an industrialized country. It was not an industrialized country. And its loss was given. It was going to happen one way or the another. So this was the worst decision. Why? It led to further shortage of goods. The goods were now in very less. Soldiers were coming home. National flags. They did not even have proper training. The whole of Russia was asking for withdrawal from war. The support of Serbia came to be a very big challenge for Tsar. And by 1917 early, things were on the verge of collapse. Women were having nothing to eat. They attacked shops for bread. Shots were fired by the police, and eventually it led to the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II. Tsar Nicholas II, he was given advice by the senior general that it is your time to abdicate. Throne छोड़ दो नहीं तो जिंदगी भी चली जाएगी. He was told this. When he was giving up his throne, the throne was offered to his brother Michael. But Michael refused to accept कि मुझे तो किंग बनना ही नहीं है जिंदगी में. He was दानवीर कर्ण. Michael refused to become the king of Russia. And finally, this led to the decline of this dynasty. Tsar was the title, and this dynasty is known as Romanov dynasty. So, the first revolution in Russia is a political revolution, where the rule of Tsar Nicholas II ended, and it led to the beginning of the rule of common people. So, this dynasty was now gone. But even after this revolution, this happened in Feb 1917. Even after this political, why I called it political revolution? Because it did not change any social and economic circumstances. उसमें कोई बहुत बड़ा change नहीं. Same things continue. What happened? Did not improve. There was a person by the name of Kerensky. So he was running this provisional government. He was running this provisional government after the decline of Tsar. वो उसको run कर रहे थे. But Kerensky, he had his own limitations. He was not able to do land reforms. The same challenge to the previous government. He did not conduct elections. People were angry. He said, war is going on. How can I conduct elections? But people were angry that you should conduct elections. Okay? That was also a major challenge to him. Third, he went for offensive in the war. And this turned out to be a big failure. He was not able to gain anything in the war. So the further war cry started, okay, that we should stop this. Under these circumstances, you see the entry of Lenin. Lenin came to India, came to this region, Russia, and the military leader was Trotsky. In fact, there is a story that the elder brother of Lenin, he tried to assassinate Tsar. His elder brother tried to assassinate Tsar, okay, the king of Russia. And as a result of this, his brother was assassinated. So this had a big impact on his head. And eventually it was because of this He eventually became a revolutionary. तो फैमिली के ऊपर इम्पैक्ट आया हुआ था ऑलरेडी. लेनिन came back. Trotsky, he organized the Red Army, and they went for this revolution which is known as Bolshevik Revolution. Known as Bolshevik Revolution or October Revolution. तो प्लीज याद रखिएगा, ठीक है. Russia remains a very important topic for us, and UPSC can ask you about this. Okay. So his older brother tried to attempt to assassinate the Tsar, but he eventually failed in that. Later on, his brother was given this punishment of assassination or assassination. ठीक है, उसके बारे में हल्का सा NCERT से पढ़ेंगे. Then the World War I ended, as we just discussed. ठीक है, दो चार चीजें हैं जो याद रखनी है. First, peace treaties were signed. Number two, along with peace treaty, we see the creation of League of Nations. What is the meaning of League of Nations? League of Nations was based upon the idea of collective security, meaning a war against any of the nation of League of Nations is a war against all of them. And this idea was put forward by Woodrow Wilson. Okay, very very important. So Woodrow Wilson, he was the one who envisaged this kind of league. Okay, envisaged this kind of league. If we see it, it had an assembly which discussed the general policies, a council with permanent members. See the permanent members: Britain, France, Italy, and even Japan. Why it is important? Why is it important? Why league will fail later on? Japan would attack China in 1931 and capture Manchuria. Italy would attack Ethiopia in 1935. So when the permanent members of the League of Nations are doing these kinds of things, do you think this kind of organization would have worked? It would have never worked. याद रखना है, बाद में डिटेल में डिस्कस भी करेंगे इसके बारे में, ठीक है. Secretariat was in Geneva. International Court of Justice was created to settle disputes. International Labour Organization, this was also created, ILO. In fact, refugee organization was also created. Objective was to prevent war, promote international cooperation, act as a mediator, and impose sanctions on countries which will be aggressors. Okay, and if we see the challenges, number one challenges, who did not become a member? US. US was following the policy of isolation. The US Senate rejected this move. भाई हम तो इसका पार्ट नहीं बनेंगे. That's point number one. Germany, it was the power which was related, the defeated one, and it was allowed to join, okay, by 1926, but it exited by 1933 under Hitler. Russia joined very later, and then it was expelled also. So unanimity required for decision making is hampered effective action. There was no concept of veto as such. Okay? So unanimity was required for decision making. So decisions could not be made that easily. Alright? Military was not there. There was underestimated the nationalism in other countries, in other countries. Right? They did some positive work also, like resolve some disputes like on Aland Islands, reduced the international opium trade, controlled disease spread, collected data on labor and business conditions, conducted plebiscite and assisted refugees, and made effort to codify the international law. But later on, it was going to fail severely. And the reason is very clear. Number one, all the major powers, okay, all the major powers of this, Italy as well as your Japan, they would attack the other territory, and it will not be able to put any sanction. पर put ही नहीं कर पाएंगे, कैसे करेंगे? You cannot put sanction on your permanent members. Like if in case of UPSC P5 today, क्या put कर सकते हैं against China? It's not possible. Against France, not possible. This was the biggest issue with respect to this League of Nations. One major event which affected the whole of the world was the Great Depression. What's the meaning of Great Depression? It means negative growth rate for a very long time. है ना। तो तीन चार वर्ड होते हैं, स्लो डाउन मीन्स वेयर द ग्रोथ रेट इज फॉलोइंग, देन वी हैव रिसेशन, रिसेशन मीन्स इफ देयर इज नेगेटिव ग्रोथ फॉर 3 quarters इट इज नोन एज रिसेशन, अगर 3 क्वार्टर के लिए नेगेटिव ग्रोथ है उसको रिसेशन, एंड द प्रोलॉन्ग्ड रिसेशन इज नोन एज डिप्रेशन, अगर वो सालों तक चलता है तो क्या बोलते हैं, डिप्रेशन। लाइक इन दिस केस द होल ड्रामा starts from 1929. You see the collapse of Wall Street. Okay, why did we see this great economic depression? Because capacity was increased by the various companies. The supply was increasing at a very higher pace in comparison to demand. And finally, in 1929, this bubble fell, and it continued till the end of Second World War. So it was a big depression across the world. In fact, this great economic depression affected Germany the worst. Germany was the worst affected country with respect to this. 6 million people became unemployed in Germany during this phase. That's why one of the major reasons for the rise of Hitler was great economic depression. If depression would not have been there, then largely the Germany was on peacefully going towards democracy. There was a republic known as Weimar Republic, which was established in 1919 in Germany. And this Weimar Republic could have continued pretty well, but it fell in 1933. Why? Because of the Great Economic Depression. तो बस ध्यान रखेंगे that this played a very important role. Okay, stock market collapsed, leading to panic across the world. Banks failed across the board, and then we see the Great Economic Depression. That's what is known as the Great Economic Depression. Then the two major topics that we need to understand, one is fascism, the second is Nazism. Okay, meaning is broadly same. There's very little difference between these ideologies. Like if you see fascism, fascism is a word which comes from Italy, means sticking together. Large number of people will stick together, they cannot be brought down. The same concept in Germany is known as Nazism. These things are going to rise. Okay, these popular things are going to rise for a certain reason. If we see the case of Italy, okay, why do we see the rise of Italy? There are certain reasons for that. Italy, even though it was part of Triple Alliance, it signed a treaty with Britain in 1915. This is known as Treaty of London. Okay? Then Italy did not support Germany. It also did not support Austria-Hungary. In fact, it did a lot of expenditure. Around $12 billion were put as an expenditure by them. They were now coming in debt trap also because their currency has depreciated sharply. They were not given the territories which were promised to them as per Treaty of London of 1915. That's why their Prime Minister, Vittorio Orlando, he left the Paris Peace Conference. 1919 में जब पेरिस पीस कॉन्फ्रेंस चल रही थी तो उनके जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर थे वो कॉन्फ्रेंस को छोड़ के चले गए। क्यों चले गए? उनको कोई भी मेजर टेरिटरीज नहीं मिली। वहीं इन्होंने उनके साथ दोस्ती निभा के खर्चा और कर दिया, है ना, कि भाई ट्रीटी ऑफ लंदन साइन कर ली, उन्होंने खर्चा और कर दिया। पैसा तो मिला नहीं, कुछ भी नहीं मिला इटली को। तो इटली नाउ बिकेम अनस्टेबल। टू मेक मैटर्स वर्स, the transition towards democracy and it took the process of proportional representation. अभी आप सोचिए, हम लोगों ने फर्स्ट पास द पोस्ट सिस्टम क्यों चूज किया? बट वाई फर्स्ट पास द पोस्ट सिस्टम, वाई नॉट प्रोपोर्शनल रिप्रेजेंटेशन? सबसे बड़ा इशू है जर्मनी और इटली दोनों जगह फेल हुआ है, ठीक है। Proportional representation came. The biggest issue with proportional representation is you will not get a majority that early. Like in first past the post system, like BJP won suppose only 35% or 36% vote, but still they could get 45% of the seats. Possible है, ठीक है। because आपको सिर्फ एक वोट ज्यादा लेना है देन योर नेक्स्ट पर्सन, डजंट मैटर. But in proportional representation, the percentage of votes and the percentage of seats, they are same. Proportional representation का सबसे बड़ी दिक्कत क्या होती है? It's difficult to get majority. It's difficult to get majority. And this was a challenge in case of Italy. From 1919 till 1922, 5 to 6 cabinet failed. 5 से 6 कैबिनेट बनाए गए 3 साल के, और सारे के सारे क्या हो गए? फेल हो गए. They were not able to work because none was having majority. This was the biggest issue in case of Italy. Later on, even in the case of Germany, the same thing is going to happen. The same thing is going to happen. So finally, in Italy, Mussolini did this famous march to Rome, and by 1922, he came to power. October 1922, he came to power. So it was the crisis after the First World War which led to the rise of Mussolini. These people did not try just because their ideas were liked by people 100%. They created the necessity. Like Mussolini met everyone, every group. He told the people that I will give you job. Told the business people I will defeat communism, because communism was also rising in Europe. Since 1917, the revolution in Russia. He told everyone whatever they were asking for. He told people, I will give you a strong government and I will also gain territory for my own country. So he was able to create an agenda which can hypnotize the people. और सारे के सारे dictators अच्छे orator होते हैं. They're very good orators. They know how to make people feel. उनके पैरों के नीचे जमीन छिन जाती है, इतने अच्छे तरीके से बोलते हैं, तो हाँ बस आप ही हो जो. That's why in Italy the rise of Mussolini was not something that he captured power. The circumstances were such and his personality was such that he came to power. And again, all the challenges which were there in front of Italy, they were unleashed by the First World War. And that's how we see the entry of Mussolini. Okay? That's how we see the rise of Mussolini. So we'll see by 1924 elections, we got how many percent of votes? 65. And again, it was through intimidation. So 1922 में पावर में आ गए, और जब पावर में आके आप इलेक्शन कराओगे तो आप क्या करोगे? बूथ कैप्चरिंग, इंटिमिडेशन, all those things were done. The socialist leader, his name was Matteotti, and he questioned the election and he was murdered. All the other parties were banned. Opposition party boycotted the parliament in protest. Does not matter. He banned opposition. तुम्हें करना है तो ठीक है, मैं भी कर देता हूँ. Press was censored. Repression was introduced and took the title of second deuce, the leader. जैसे कि उनके केस में the Führer है. Here it is deuce, and he became a dictator with legislative power. He put a law for anti-strike, created corporate system under which different sectors of economy they used to sit together, and then eventually they used to take decisions. Yes, leader, Italian word है, और क्या करोगे? टैग है जैसे फ्यूरर है. द एम्परर इज आल्सो नोन एज द फ्यूरर, द लीडर. द वर्ड द लीडर. दीज पीपल क्रिएटेड द कल्ट ऑफ लीडर. एक ही लीडर है हमारे, तो वो बस वो क्रिएट करने की कोशिश करता है. ठीक है. देन abolition of parliament, it was abolished in 1938. Further, it increased the dictatorial control and there was destruction of democratic institutions. So all of this happened in Italy in a very quick sense, and finally, eventually, it led towards the downfall. Okay. Then, if we talk about Germany, Germany was the worst affected country. Germany was affected by the First World War. Germany was affected by what? By Treaty of Versailles. That was the biggest issue in their case. Okay. Please remember, the reparations brought their economy to knees. Exploitation by the reactionary forces. The reactionaries blamed socialists and Jews for Germany's defeat. This is from where Jews were targeted. They said it is this Weimar Republic. They said it is stabbed in the back. इन लोगों ने हमें धोखा दिया है. This is how these ideas were developed. Then nobody was ready to accept the defeat. Economic crisis began, as all of us can understand, in 1929. The Republican government, it became weak. From 1990 to 1933, there was a republic by the name of Weimar. Weimar is a place where the constitution was created. That's why it is known as Weimar Republic. Okay. Second, coalition governments were formed of multiple political parties. The first person was Frederick Ebert. He led the government till 1925. In fact, from 1923 till 1928, they was thinking that probably the worst is over because Germany was getting loans from USA and Germany was paying its loan to the rest of the. But लग रहा था कि सारी चीजें सही हो जाएगी. But 1929, the Great Economic Depression took away everything. Then we have the second person by the name of Gustav Stresemann. पहले का नाम क्या है? Frederick Ebert. The second is Gustav Stresemann. He led the government in 1929 and he was linked with liberal Democrats. Then the challenges. Number one, burden of reparation, as we discussed, 6.6 billion pounds. French occupied Ruhr. Now, Ruhr is a place which is known for what? They're known for coal mining. बोलते हैं ना जैसे इंडिया में झरिया इज द रूर ऑफ इंडिया. ज्योग्राफी में पढ़ोगे इसके बारे में. When Germany was not able to repay France on time, उन्हें किसको कैप्चर कर लिया? रूर को कैप्चर कर लिया. भाई ठीक है, तुम पैसा नहीं है तो ये ले लेंगे. Underground movement started, like led by Ludendorff, to organize soldiers against the Republican government in Berlin. In Munich, Adolf Hitler, he became the leader of this National Socialist German Workers Party. और इसी को हम बाद में क्या बोलेंगे? नाजी. ठीक है, नेशनल सोशलिस्ट जर्मन वर्कर्स पार्टी. ठीक है. देन द पर्सन हिमसेल्फ, इनकी अगर स्टोरी की बात करें तो ही ट्राइड टू कैप्चर पावर इन 1923. ही ट्राइड टू सीज पावर इन बवेरिया which led to his imprisonment. He was in fact involved in the First World War. In the First World War, he was a soldier and he was fought. बाद में इनको छोड़ दिया गया था. ठीक है. 1923, he tried to capture power in Bavaria. When he was in jail, he wrote this autobiography, which became world famous. It is known as Mein Kampf, means my struggle. That's the most prominent one. Later on, once the Great Economic Depression started, this started the real rise of Hitler. क्योंकि देखो, प्रोपेगेंडा करने का सबसे अच्छा टाइम होता है क्राइसिस, जब आधी दुनिया को सिर्फ ये सुनना है कि सब ठीक हो जाएगा. ठीक है ना, उनको पता नहीं होगा, बट क्या सुनना है? Everything will be alright. This was the time when Hitler threw it. In 1932, Communist Party of Germany, it gained significant votes, and this increased the support for fascism. Finally, Hitler's ascendancy also happened in 1933. The president at that point of time was von Hindenburg. Von Hindenburg, even though the Germans, if you see among the Germans, Hitler was not in majority. वो majority में नहीं थे, but still उनको मौका मिला ठीक है कि आप जाके गवर्नमेंट बना सकते हो. But what he did, eventually he went for re-election, okay, and that's how he created a majority, and then he established a dictatorship. What he did eventually, first he replaced the Weimar Republic flag and bring on which flag? Swastika. ठीक है. Centralized states associated political parties were banned. Militarization was done. Labor front, they were abolished. Leaders were arrested. All workers joined the German labor front. Strikes were made illegal. ठीक है, सारी कहानी खत्म हो गई. Then the most important person is Joseph Goebbels. He was the minister of propaganda. And he used to say, any lie frequently repeated will ultimately gain belief. झूठ इतनी बार बोलो कि सच के बारे में पता ही ना चले कोई. This is what Goebbels used to do. In fact, they created films हिटलर की लाइफ के ऊपर, सब झूठ कि हिटलर इज द फिनोमिना, हिटलर विल सेव जर्मनी. All those things were done by the person by the name of Joseph Goebbels, the biggest propaganda, सबसे बड़ा marketing expert in the world is Joseph Goebbels. He could sell any message. He could sell any message to anyone. Joseph Goebbels was responsible for the creation of personality cult of Hitler. Then they created this secret police also known as Gestapo. Led by Himmler, they controlled the Hitler's bodyguard, and this saw the transformation in Germany from a democracy to a fascist regime. By 1934, Hitler was in firm control, and this was going to lead to what is known as the World War II. The World War II was going to happen because of this. Why did we see the beginning of the World War II? Let us try to understand. The World War II started in 1939. What was the immediate circumstances? Germany attacked Poland on 1st of September 1939. That is known as the beginning of Second World War. But before that, the 4-5 years, there were lots of challenges which we need to understand. Powers which were led by Great Britain, they were allied powers, and the Axis powers included Germany, Italy, and later on we see the entry of even Japan. Okay. During the Second World War, certain events just before that happened, which created circumstances for the Second World War. So see, the first biggest issue was Treaty of Versailles. Germany lost colonies, Germany lost self-respect, Germany also lost money, and Germany got destabilized. This was the first point. Okay? This was the first point, Treaty of Versailles. Second point, you can see at the top, what was its impact on Germany? So they created this feeling of injustice. Now they were looking for someone who could fight on their behalf, and Hitler was the person for that. In Italy, they felt aggrieved as Dalmatia was given to Yugoslavia, so Treaty of London was not respected. In the case of Austria, it was reduced to a small republic. It was forbidden to unite with Germany and to prevent a threat to France. Finally, the next factor responsible for the decline or for the rise of the Second World War is League of Nations. League of Nations failed. Okay, League of Nations, they signed multiple pacts, but these pacts did not work out. These pacts did not work out. Like this Kellogg-Brand Pact was signed. As per this pact, effectively, the tensions were removed between Germany and the rest of the powers. However, the biggest issue with this is that they were not able to take it forward due after the Great Economic Depression. League of Nations was fairly successful from 1920 till 1929. 9 साल के लिए. From 1929 till 1939, this organization could not work. Like in 1928, they signed this Kellogg-Brand Pact. Multiple nations, including US, objective was that everybody pledged that we will never use war. We'll never use war as an instrument of foreign policy. कभी भी लड़ाई नहीं लड़ेंगे. And the failure was very much because everybody defied this. जैसे कि सबसे बड़ा मूव किसने किए? Hitler. In 1933, one disarmament conference was going on. Hitler said, तुम सब लोग तो disarmament करते नहीं हो, सिर्फ किसके ऊपर डालते हो ये provision? Germany के. So he left disarmament conference. Then he went for the plebiscite, okay, and they were able to gain the areas whichever were left at the time of Treaty of Versailles. Second, he planned to build an army by conscription. Conscription, all of you understand? What is the meaning of conscription? Compulsory military service. जैसे इसराइल में अगर आप जाओगे तो वहाँ पे अभी भी कॉन्स्क्रिप्शन. डजंट मैटर आप कौन हो, आपको क्या करना पड़ेगा, आर्मी में सर्व करना ही पड़ेगा. इंडिया के अंदर ये सिस्टम अभी नहीं है, जैसे हमारे पास वैसे ही इतनी बड़ी आर्मी और हमारी पॉपुलेशन चली जाता है, कॉन्स्क्रिप्शन की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती है हम लोगों को. ठीक है. तो ऑल्सो वॉयलेटेड दिस लीग ऑफ नेशंस, इट वाज लेफ्ट बिहाइंड. ठीक है. देन द साइड पैक्ट विद Britain, we will have only 35% of the Britain's naval strength. This was also not followed by him. The biggest issue is this Great Economic Depression. Great Economic Depression के बाद things changed, and one country which was now affected severely, it was Japan. Japan was affected by this, and that's why Japan attacked Manchuria. Okay. German businesses sought to break the Treaty of Versailles. Nazis were ready, their interests were converging, and finally, the grievances of the German patriots. So, Hitler was the person leading the charge with respect to this. Rome-Berlin Axis was created, okay, by 1936. Became Rome-Berlin Tokyo. Tokyo was this. Japan's imperial policy continued. Okay, Japan was in fact responsible for capturing the region of Manchuria. Hitler, he also played an important role in the beginning of the Second World War. First, he incorporated Tsar in Germany. Number two, he also militarized the Rhineland. It was not allowed under Treaty of Versailles. Then he forced merger with Austria in 1938. Then he asked for the place known as Sudetenland. Sudetenland, it was a German-speaking area. It was part of Czechoslovakia. So finally, all the major powers they came together and they signed this Munich Pact. And as per the Munich Pact, effectively it became part of Germany. But Hitler did not stop there. Okay, the next thing is he captured the rest of the Czechoslovakia. This is known as the policy of appeasement. There was a prime minister of Britain. His name is Neville Chamberlain. नेविल चैम्बरलेन को लगा कि मैं हिटलर को सिविलाइज कर दूं, छोटी मोटी जो उसकी जरूरतें हैं पूरी कर देते हैं. अगर उसको सडेटनलैंड की तो वो दे देंगे, जो भी एरिया चाहो ना, लड़ाई क्यों लड़नी, मुझे बताओ, आई विल टेल यू व्हाट टू डू, व्हाट नॉट टू डू. नेविल चैम्बरलेन फ्रॉम 1937 till 1939 he kept on pursuing with Hitler so that there is no war. But Hitler was a monster. You cannot sign a treaty with the monster. Every time you accepted his demand, he became strong, became stronger than before. That's why you always say policy of appeasement played a very important role in the beginning of Second World War. Okay, we see the signing of the Munich Agreement also, which eventually took away the Allied powers, USA, Russia, and Britain on one side. On the other side, we had Germany, Italy along with it, and later on, we see the entry of Japan, Italy, and Germany. On the other hand, the rest of the powers. Okay, Nazi Soviet. This is known as the beginning of the Second World War. In August 1939, Nazis and Soviets they signed the pact. Western power used to think that Germany will be a bulwark against communism. वो communism को हराने में हमारी help करेगी. But इन दोनों ने क्या sign कर लिया? Peace treaty. Now after this, things ended. In fact, when Hitler asked for Poland, he was given warning by whom? Britain. That this will be an act of war. So finally, in 1939, on the 1st of September, when this happened, it led to the Second World War. ठीक है, बहुत सारे stages हैं देखो war के. Initially, Germany was very successful. In fact, this is known as what is known as Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg means lightning war. So they were able to defeat Poland 2 हफ्ते के अंदर. सोचो ना यार, पूरी कंट्री को कितने दिन में हरा दिया? 2 हफ्ते के अंदर. Blitzkrieg. Next, they occupied Norway. They also occupied Western Europe, नीदरलैंड, लग्जमबर्ग, बेल्जियम, फ्रांस, सब के सब. इनफैक्ट एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरी है. फ्रांस के जनरल्स कैलकुलेट कर रहे थे कितने दिन के अंदर जर्मन्स हमारे पास आ सकते हैं इफ दे अटैक अस. तो उन्होंने आइडिया लगाया कि भाई इट विल टेक रफली अराउंड 1 ईयर, 1 साल के आसपास लगे, क्या है कितना टाइम लगेगा. बट जर्मन्स ने क्या किया, जर्मन्स ने नई दवाइयाँ निकाली. ठीक है, उनसे क्या था कि सोल्जर्स एक बार खाते तो नींद ही नहीं आती. दे केप्ट ऑन टेकिंग दीज टैंक्स फॉर 2-3 days in one go. सुपर ह्यूमन कैपेबिलिटी किसने क्रिएट करवाई? नाजीज. बाय द टाइम फ्रेंच वुड हैव रियलाइज कि जो एरिया 1 साल में कवर करना था, जर्मनी ने कितने में कर लिया सर? 6 महीने के अंदर कवर लिया, 4 महीने के अंदर कवर. दिस इज व्हाट इज नोन एज ब्लिट्जक्रिग. टैंक्स लेके घुसे अंदर एंड कैप्चर्ड एवरीवन. ब्रिटिश एंड अलाइड ट्रूप्स, उनको किसी तरीके से इवैक्यूएट किया गया था. इनफैक्ट दिस इज फेमसली नोन एज द इवैक्यूएशन ऑफ डनकर्क. एक फेमस मूवी भी है क्रिस्टोफर नोलन की, बाय द नेम ऑफ डनकर्क. So Dunkirk is a place towards the western part of France. और इसको हम बोलते हैं Dunkirk evacuation. This is very very important. Dunkirk is very very important. Why? Because it was at Dunkirk if the Germans would have captured this area, देन लगभग 2-2.5 लाख सोल्जर्स को किल कर सकते, एंड दैट कुड हैव कंप्लीटली एंडेड द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर। ठीक है, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। दिस इवैक्यूएशन वाज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। इनफैक्ट Italy joined Germany in June. They invaded France as well as Egypt. Japan joined Axis during this time, and then comes the famous Battle of Britain. Okay, it's very very important. This Battle of Britain, this was an aerial battle. Okay, it was an aerial battle. Germany targeted ports, airfields, London cities was bombed regularly. It was bombed regular basis. इस बैटल को जीतने के बाद थोड़ा सा ना एक लेवल का एक्सेप्टेंस आई थी अमंग द, आपको याद है अगस्त ऑफर इंडिया में आया था? Why did we see the August offer? Why it came in August 1940? Because Germany were very close to destroying the British, and this is known as the Battle of Britain. And finally, somehow they won this Battle of Britain from July to October 1940. हर चीज ड्यूरिंग द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर, जब भी वहां को इवेंट हुआ, इंडिया की नेशनल मूवमेंट भी अफेक्ट हुई। जब जर्मन्स बहुत ज्यादा अटैक कर रहे थे, फाइनली दे सेंड अगस्त ऑफर टू इंडिया, भाई आप कुछ ऐसा बस स्टार्ट कर देना, we will be completely taken aback by that. Then German submarine came in. फिर आता है एक next chapter. So far, yes. हम्म हम्म देखो हिटलर के साथ दिक्कत क्या थी ना, हिटलर को पहले ब्रिटेन को हराना चाहिए। हिटलर ने क्या किया, हर किसी से वॉर कर लिया। He considered that he is invincible. So he fought with every small country, सबको हरा चुका था ये, ठीक है। Britain was the only one. The issue with Britain is that Britain is an island and they have a very strong navy. So without defeating Britain, he went towards Soviet Union. This was the biggest blunder of the Second World War. This is known as Operation Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa. And after this, eventually, Germans they went towards Leningrad as well as Moscow. But इसी एरिया में जाके वो हारेंगे। Napoleon got defeated in Russia by weather. Same thing is going to happen to Hitler. हिटलर भी वहां ऑक्यूपाई करने विंटर में जाएगा। विंटर में रशिया को नहीं खाता, रशियंस खुद सब कुछ जला जलू के पीछे चले जाते हैं। द ओनली स्ट्रेटजी यूज बाय देम इज नोन एज स्कॉर्च्ड अर्थ पॉलिसी। बात करें ना मॉडर्न में भी, सब कुछ पूरी सिटी को आग लगाते और पीछे चले जाते हैं। व्हेन यू डू नॉट हैव फूड एंड वाटर, कैसे सर्वाइव करोगे? वो सबसे बड़ी दिक्कत है इन द रीजन ऑफ रशिया, स्पेशली इन विंटर। So Hitler's empire reached peak by 1941. Then the one biggest issue during this, 6 million Jews were murdered in the concentration camps. And one area which was probably most affected, it was in the region of Poland. Okay, so one area which was most affected was in the Poland. We can't even imagine how things happen. Then we see the Pearl Harbor attack. Okay, the attack on Pearl Harbor in USA, and this eventually led to the beginning of entry of Japan. Once Japan entered, USA started supporting the Allies even more. This increased the resources. Then we see the key battles like August 1942. General MacArthur takes a prominent role in Pacific. Battle of Midway, here the Japanese loses in June 1942. Then Battle of Guadalcanal. Okay, the army of USA and Navy they fought in Solomon Islands. Philippines is captured by the Americans. By 1944, Japan attempted to invade Northeast India. All of you remember? Okay? They tried to come through Imphal and the Kohima campaign. Then they were defeated there also. And then later on, Allies also took over control of Malaysia as well as Singapore. While on the other side, the Germans were fighting. Germans were not able to use this philosophy of blitzkrieg. Okay? The most famous battle is the Battle of Stalingrad. This is the most famous battle of the whole of World War II. Stalingrad. इसके ऊपर एक मूवी भी The Battle of Stalingrad के ऊपर. Battle of Stalingrad is so important. Why? Because this is from where the Germans were defeated by the Russians. यहाँ से उनकी उल्टी गिनती शुरू होती है, ठीक है? And that's why symbolic value due to city's name Soviet Joseph Stalin. ठीक है? The determination was there, but eventually they were defeated in the Battle of Stalingrad. Thereafter, things went bad. To condemn to cold starvation death, Soviet army murdered nationalism fought relentlessly. Counter-offensive started, and finally, as all of us can understand, approximately 20 million total deaths were there in Russia. 13 million soldiers and 7 million civilians they lost life. The war, which starts in 1939, has multiple phases. In 1941, we see the entry of USA, USSR. Even though both were having different ideology, one capitalism, one is communism. On the other hand, we see the entry of Japan. By 1942, USSR starts playing a role in defeating of Germany. By 1944, Germany is on the verge of collapse. Italy already lost. Okay, so what happened in Italy? Actually, Mussolini, he was overthrown from power. Okay, and he was saved by Hitler somehow, but again Italy lost. Germany was on the verge of downfall. By 1945, we see the use of warfare. Japan, it was attacked with atomic bomb. USA was having this Manhattan project. This Manhattan project led to the creation of atomic bomb, and they were thrown in two cities of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And after this, eventually these two powers, they were not having any will to continue the war. That completely led to the end of the Second World War. Second World War was very prominent because this is the worst war which has happened in the history of the world. And once the war happened, the next thing it was to begin, it was peacemaking. So from 1945 onwards, we see the solution of the next world, how the world was to be created. And 2-3 conferences happened for that purpose. We had Yalta conference, we had Potsdam conference, we had the Paris conference also later on in 1946. Multiple conferences were held, but things could not come to the picture very clearly. The problem was, by 1945, everybody realized that there are two powers. One is USA, the second is USSR. USA wanted that capitalism should stay, it should prosper. But if we see the case of USSR, it wanted to spread the ideology of communism. And this was going to play a very prominent role in what is known as Cold War. Okay, this is what is known as Cold War. So what was Cold War in general? Without war without weapons. Weapons were used, but not between USA and USSR. So this includes multiple things. 5-6 चीजें होती हैं जो आपको याद करनी पड़ेगी. Number one, proxy wars. Like wars was fought in Korea and Vietnam, not directly by USA and USSR in their territory, but in the territory of Korea and Vietnam. Number two, war of espionage. Both countries were trying to extract as much vital information as possible. Okay? Number three, they used to have this arms race and space race. All of you know that the first time satellite was created by USSR, है ना, तो स्पुतनिक, और उसके बाद एक अलग रेस शुरू हो गई. ठीक है, weapons of mass destruction were created. Like first 1945 it was whom? It was USA. By 1949 it was also created by Russia or USSR. So lots of things were there. Why is it called Cold War? There is a British writer by the name of George Orwell. आपने इनकी एक फेमस बुक शायद पढ़ी थी, एनिमल फार्म. तो जॉर्ज ऑरवेल की एक बुक है एनिमल फार्म. ठीक है, जॉर्ज ऑरवेल टॉक्स अबाउट कोल्ड वॉर, फर्स्ट पर्सन. The first person who talked about what is Cold War is George Orwell. जॉर्ज ऑरवेल एक ब्रिटिश राइटर है, उनकी दो तीन अच्छी बुक हैं, एक है एनिमल फार्म, एक है 1984। ये सारी बहुत अच्छी अच्छी हैं। इन्होंने पहली बार वर्ड यूज किया था कोल्ड वॉर, और बाद में यूएस के सेक्रेटरी थे बर्नर्ड बारूच, ही यूज्ड द सेम इन 1947। दिस इज व्हाट इज नोन एज कोल्ड वॉर। कोल्ड वॉर की देखो स्टोरी बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, स्टार्ट फ्रॉम 1945 इट कंटिन्यूज टिल 1991। व्हाई इन 1945? ऐसा क्या हो गया? व्हाट हैपेंड, लाइक व्हाई? सही है, दिस वाज वन ऑफ द फैक्टर। यस, देखिए 1941 we see the entry of both USA and USSR in Second World War, but it was just a marriage of convenience. दिल से शादी नहीं हुई थी, ठीक है? They were just friends for the warfare. They were not friends for lifelong. So by 1945, what happened? USSR started expansion in eastern part of Europe. वहाँ सारी कम्युनिस्ट गवर्नमेंट्स को वो लगा देना शुरू कर दिया। Like if we talk about the communist governments, we have in Poland, in the region of Czechoslovakia, everywhere it was now trying to install the communist governments. This was now going to create a big challenge. This was going to create a big challenge for USA. USA till 1940s, it was still pursuing the policy of isolation. कोई हमें जाके दुनिया में कुछ नहीं करना. But this was not going to stop until and unless कुछ एक लेवल का समझौता हो. फिर एक जो सबसे बड़ा इशू है वो आया एटॉमिक वेपन। रशिया को बताया भी नहीं गया था कि भाई हम एटॉमिक वेपन यूज करने वाले हैं, तो रशिया थॉट इट अदरवाइज दैट यूएसए इज जस्ट ट्राइंग टू शो कि अगर आपने एक्सपेंशन बंद नहीं किया तो अगला एटॉमिक वेपन आपके ऊपर भी आ सकता है। जापान वाज जस्ट अ स्केपगोट, द मेन टारगेट वाज यूएसएसआर। मुझे दिमाग में यही चीज पनपने लगी, ठीक है ना? तो ऐसे बहुत सारी चीजें होती, स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम 1917 all the way up to 1945 there were multiple issues which eventually led to the beginning of Cold War. Start ये 1917 से आता है इसका बैकग्राउंड। 1917 में जैसे रशियन रेवोल्यूशन सक्सेसफुल होता है तो एक सिविल वॉर स्टार्ट होता है। दिस सिविल वॉर कंटिन्यूज फ्रॉम 1917 all the way to 1920, और इसमें बोल्शेविक्स एक तरफ होते हैं लेड बाय लेनिन एंड ट्रोट्स्की वर्सेस all the other parties of Russia, plus they were also having the support from these countries, the capitalist countries. So from the beginning, there was a kind of hostility between capitalism and communism. Same continue करते हैं, रशिया को लीग ऑफ नेशन का पार्ट नहीं बनने देते। रशिया फिर ऐसे काम करता है कि भाई वेस्टर्न इसको और हेट करने देते। He signs the pact with the Nazis in 1939. Then in 1941, when both USA and USSR they entered the Second World War, सबसे ज्यादा जो प्रेशर था वो रशिया के ऊपर था। हमने देखा ना कितने लोगों की मौत हुई, 20 मिलियन इन द केस ऑफ रशिया। तो 1942 में एक डिमांड थी स्टार्टिंग की, फ्रांस वाज अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ जर्मनी, तो दे सेड कि अगर आप चाहते हो कि जर्मन का जो प्रेशर है हमारे ऊपर कम हो जाए तो ओपन द सेकंड फ्रंट। और वो सेकंड फ्रंट क्या था? स्टार्ट वॉर फ्रॉम स्पेन। स्पेन के थ्रू ओपन करो और इससे क्या होगा, रशियन जो जर्मन अटेंशन है इट विल गेट डिवाइडेड। ये 2 साल के लिए खोला ही नहीं गया। द सेकंड फ्रंट वाज ओपन इन 1944। स्टालिन वाज वेरी अनहैप्पी कि तुम तो मुझे मरवाने की कोशिश कर रहे हो, तुम चाहते तो पहले से स्पेन से क्या कर सकते थे, आके अटैक कर सकते जर्मनी के ऊपर, बट दैट डिड नॉट हैपन। एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस बाय 1945 द सर्कमस्टांसेस वर ऑलरेडी देयर। वर्ल्ड वॉर खत्म हुआ, पीस ट्रीटी भी साइन नहीं हो पाई। That's why it eventually led to the beginning of Cold War. The Cold War क्या था? It was a general policy of non-cooperation. क्या बोलते हैं? General policy of non-cooperation between the two superpowers, USA and USSR, and it was marked by what? It was marked by espionage. It was marked by proxy wars. It was marked by arms race. It was marked by space race. So there was competition in every walk of life. Competition with respect to economic growth, competition even in Olympics. These people used to fight कि जैसे कि war चल रहा है Olympics के अंदर, कौन ज्यादा मेडल लेके आएगा। तो हाँ, वो उस तरीके से समझ लीजिए, ठीक है ना। जैसे इंडिया पाकिस्तान का मैच होता है क्रिकेट के अंदर, बाकी जगह तो पाकिस्तान कुछ नहीं कर सकता, क्रिकेट में थोड़ा खेल लेते हैं लोग, है ना। दैट्स व्हाई 1945 तक there was a beginning of an issue which is known as Cold War. Cold War के देखो phases हैं. Formally it starts from 1945. It continues up to 1981, where you see the decline of USSR. And there's only one lone superpower, and that is USA. ठीक है. कोल्ड वॉर की कुछ इवेंट्स हैं, जल्दी जल्दी से इनके बारे में बात कर लेते हैं. In 1945, USSR was doing expansion in eastern part of Europe. Okay, that fueled the beginning of Cold War. Along with this, we can see that all these conferences, which we talked about, Yalta or Potsdam, all those conferences have failed. That's why it was a big challenge. Talk about this Chinese revolution later on. Yes. So, yes, two conferences were there. Post-war, you see the rise of socialist movements. Two areas which are affected were Greece and Turkey. Two areas. Till the Second World War, Britain used to consider itself as the major champion of the people. इन्होंने एक रिटर्न में लिख के भेजा that we will not be able to fight with USSR. Now it is up to USA to take the leadership. हमारे पास अपना पैसा है ना, हमारे पास weapons है ना soldiers. This is something which led to the beginning of the entry of the USA. USA की एंट्री होती है, ठीक है. ये जो दो कॉन्फ्रेंस हैं, पोट्सडैम कॉन्फ्रेंस, द याल्टा कॉन्फ्रेंस, दे फेल. USSR also developed the atomic bomb, right? But the most important too is the Eastern European Sovietization. They installed communist government in 46 as well as 47, and that's how we see the beginning of Cold War. सबसे important part है जो आपको याद रखना है हमेशा के लिए, ठीक है, is that USA wanted certain things. USA wanted that there should be containment of communism. Communism spread ना कर पाए. Why was communism spreading? What could be the reason for that? The biggest reason was USSR. USSR was installing communism. Second, many countries who were not given independence, now they were also becoming communists. जैसे कि Vietnam. There was a person by the name of Ho Chi Minh. The communism was now spreading in different parts of the world. China became a communist country in 1949 under Mao. Korea was temporarily divided into North and South Korea. North part was communist, South part was capitalist. This war continued from 1950 to 53, and finally Korea remained divided. Vietnam. India did not follow the policy of communism. But it was like an internal matter, not at the national level. So in case of India, what happened that we were not following the USSR's communism. India was following the policy of NAM, non-aligned movement. पीपल वर देयर बट उनका जो इन्फ्लुएंस था सेंटर पे नहीं. इट्स वेरी क्लियर लाइक British gave us power in 1947. It was transfer of power at that point of time. So the policies of Nehru were not that of a communist. In communists, the first thing that they do is abolition of private property. Number two, then they declare that there is only one party in India. In case of India, that was not there. We were a democracy. We had a constitution based upon the forward values. इसलिए इंडिया इसके अंदर नहीं फंसा. But China, there was a fight between two parties, KMT versus Communist Party of China. So these two, okay, KMT, Kuomintang, this was a nationalist party. It was led by Chiang Kai-shek, and CPC, it was led by Mao Zedong. Okay, so when he won on 1st of October 1949, this was a big setback for USA. It was a very big country, China, and when a big country like China became communist, USA was now completely affected by it. They thought in the future we will not allow any country to become communist. उन्होंने अपनी एक प्रॉमिस किया अपने आप को फ्यूचर में नहीं होने देंगे. That's why when next year Korea was trying to become a communist country, they entered. The war continued, and finally there was a division. Same happened in the case of Vietnam. Vietnam was under the control of France. In 1946 and 1954, there was a war with France. France was defeated, but USA entered in 1955 and continues to be there till 1973. In fact, Vietnam was also divided into North and South Vietnam, but by 1973 it eventually became one. And here the leader was Ho Chi Minh. He was Ho Chi Minh. So the rise of communism made USA very affected, or the psychology of USA changed because of that. And that's why it became more and more embroiled in this Cold War. Yes. Hmm. Hmm. Vietnam, देखो, Vietnam was having with major forest area. So in those forest area, they were fighting with guerrilla method. गुरिल्ला मेथड जो था उसके लिए यूएसए ट्रेंड है. तो देखो ज्योग्राफी इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. व्हाई नोबडी इज एबल टू कैप्चर अफगानिस्तान? यूएसए रहा 20 साल, लास्ट में क्या किया? तालिबान को पावर देके चला गया. नथिंग इज लेफ्ट. राइट. ये चीज होती है कि जब आपकी ज्योग्राफी ही सपोर्ट नहीं करती तो वॉर नहीं जीत सकते. इन वियतनाम ऑल्सो व्हाट वाज देयर दैट इफ यू सी वियतनाम एक आर्क की तरह है. तो अगर आप देखोगे इसकी ज्योग्राफी, नॉर्थ वियतनाम एंड साउथ वियतनाम दो टेरिटरी थी. North Vietnam was already communist. It was an accepted fact as per the Geneva Convention of 1954. But the South Vietnam is where the major challenge was. तो साउथ वियतनाम के अंदर गुरिल्ला वॉरफेयर स्टार्ट होता है. हो ची मिन सपोर्ट करते हैं. एक फैक्शन बनता है बाय द नेम ऑफ वियत कोंग, और वो उसको कंटिन्यू करते हैं टिल 1970. गुरिल्ला मेथड यूज कर रहे थे, बट फ्रांस के खिलाफ क्या था ना कि फ्रांस एक्सेप्टेड देम कि भाई ठीक है हम जा रहे हैं 1954. And France was not that powerful as USA. तो उनके साथ तो क्या था, ऑलरेडी वियतनाम जो था इट वाज अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ द फ्रेंच फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम. फाइनली उनको डिफीट भी कर दिया. ठीक है ना. एंड फाइनली आफ्टर दैट यूएसए एंटर्ड. वे तुमसे नहीं हो पा रहा, हम करते हैं कुछ. तो वो कंटिन्यू करता फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम. इन 73 तक चलेगा. कम्युनिज्म को तो देखो सपोर्ट मिल ही जाता ना हर जगह. ऐसा कोई एक जगह था नहीं, हर जगह से उसको सपोर्ट मिल रहा. दैट वाज ऑलरेडी देयर. तो वो तो हम बोल ही रहे हैं ना. इट्स अ जनरल पॉलिसी ऑफ नॉन कॉपरेशन बिटवीन यूएसए एंड यूएसएसआर, एंड दे यूज मल्टीपल थिएटर्स. कभी वो कोरिया बन जाता था, कभी वो वियतनाम बन जाता था, कभी वो क्यूबा बन जाता था, कभी अफगानिस्तान बन जाता था. हर जगह कुछ ना कुछ हुआ है ना. हर जगह कुछ ना कुछ हुआ है. तो आप इवेंट समझोगे एक बार जल्दी से. ठीक है. देखिए ये हमने इवेंट्स देखे एशिया के, तो हमने अभी एग्जांपल्स किए. एग्जांपल कौन कौन से लिए हमने? China, second was Korea, and the third was Vietnam. These are examples of Asia. If we see examples from the whole Europe itself, वहाँ पे एक एरिया जो सबसे important है, that is the area of Germany. Now, no peace treaty could be signed. ठीक है, कोई ठीक से peace treaty sign हुई नहीं, तो decision लिया गया. So Germany will be divided into 4 parts. The whole of Germany was joined to how many parts? 4 parts. ठीक है, one was under Britain, France, USA, one area under USSR. The capital city was Berlin. Berlin was again divided into 4 parts. अपने हिसाब से कुछ भी नहीं, एक ही फॉर्मूला चल रहा. Berlin was in the part of USSR. What happened? Since it was having some territory of or some control from Britain, USA, तो हर जगह से road और rail links थे, which were connecting Britain, France, and USA's area with the area of Berlin. Now, what happened by 1948? Okay, USSR started a blockade. उन्होंने blockade start कर दिया. क्यों? Because they wanted कि यहाँ से कौन चला जाए, यहाँ से USA अगर जितनी वेस्टर्न पावर्स हैं वो आना बंद कर दें. बट द वेस्टर्न पावर केम आउट विद अ स्ट्रॉन्ग रिस्पॉन्स. दे यूज द एरियल पावर. एरियल पावर को उन्होंने यूज करना स्टार्ट कर दिया. इट कंटिन्यूड फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम. फॉर नियरली 11 months वेस्ट बर्लिन वाज सप्लाइड बाय एयर एट इमेंस कॉस्ट. मई 1949 में जाके यूएसआर ने लिफ्ट किया बैन, एंडिंग द क्राइसिस. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इसी को हम क्या बोलते हैं? बर्लिन ब्लॉकेड और बर्लिन क्राइसिस. जहाँ पे जो बर्लिन का एरिया था विच वॉज कनेक्टेड टू द एरिया ऑफ यूएसए, फ्रांस एज वेल एज द रीजन, इट वॉज नाउ और द ब्रिटेन, इट वॉज नाउ टेकन अवे फ्रॉम द अदर्स. 2 जर्मनी बनाई गई, वेस्ट जर्मनी. तो बाय 1949 they were able to create Federal Republic of Germany, the Western powers. इसी के अगेंस्ट रशिया ने क्या बनाया? ईस्ट जर्मनी, जर्मन डेमोक्रेटिक रिपब्लिक और टीडीआर in October 1941. जर्मनी was divided into how many parts? 2 parts. एक वेस्ट जर्मनी बन गया और एक ईस्ट जर्मनी बन गया. तो ये इस तरीके से जर्मनी में कंटिन्यू करता है पार्टीशन फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम. जैसा कि मैंने आपको बताया था, द वर्ड कोल्ड वॉर वाज यूज्ड बाय जॉर्ज ऑरवेल, और इसको फिर बाद में यूज किया था बाय बर्नार्ड बारूच. ओके, so he was advisor to US president and he used this. So what is Cold War? The war of ideologies. ठीक है ना? Capitalism versus communism. The US wanted to promote what? Capitalism, open market, free market economy. While on the other side, USSR wanted to spread communism. Okay, the ideas of Karl Marx. And this is why we see 6 type of problems between these two. तो ये लोग क्या करेंगे? They will give economic aid to the other countries so that they can become communists. They will use the military pacts to spread communism or capitalism. They will use propaganda. They will use espionage. Espionage, all of you understand? Secret agencies. This is CIA is the agency of USA and Russia has KGB. जैसे आपकी इजराइल की कौन सी है? मोसाद, है ना? Brinkmanship. Brinkmanship means putting so much of pressure on your enemy that they give up. That is known as the principle of brinkmanship. And finally, surrogate war or proxy war. This is what we see during the Cold War. So please ये 4-5-6 वर्ड याद कर लीजिएगा. ठीक है? In everywhere थिएटर सिर्फ चेंज होता था, प्रोसेस चेंज था, कुछ भी इसमें चेंज नहीं हुआ, उस तरीके से चलता रहा है. ठीक है? यूएसए नॉर्मली क्या करता था? इट यूज टू परस्यू द पॉलिसी ऑफ गोल्डन आइसलैंड. बट ये सारी कहानी कौन सा डॉक्ट्रिन चेंज करता है? ट्रूमन, हैरी एस ट्रूमन. ही वाज द प्रेसिडेंट एट द टाइम ऑफ द बिगिनिंग ऑफ सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर, और वो लेके आते हैं इस डॉक्ट्रिन को. क्या बोलते हैं? ट्रूमन डॉक्ट्रिन. इट मीन्स that they would support every country which is being affected by armed minority. कि जहाँ भी कम्युनिस्ट लोग कोशिश कर रहे हैं कैप्चर करने को पावर की, उसको हम सपोर्ट करेंगे उनकी नेशनल गवर्नमेंट्स को. तो सबसे पहला कहाँ पर किया गया? ग्रीस के अंदर. इनफैक्ट पहले यहाँ पे ब्रिटेन was supporting the Greece government, but it said कि भाई हम नहीं कर पाएंगे. And finally, Britain informed US. And in 1947, finally, we see the entry of this Truman Doctrine. Harry S. Truman came out with this. He supported Greece as well as Turkey. And finally, both the countries became capitalists. That shows the efficacy of the doctrine of Truman. मैंने बोला, will contain the spread of communism. Number one, laid the framework for US foreign policy throughout the Cold War, and it continued till 1991. चलता रहा तब तक. Then Truman Doctrine जो था, it was about military power. वहीं उसके साथ में एक इकोनॉमिक पैकेज भी दिया गया, तो हम क्या बोलते हैं, मार्शल प्लान. तो जॉर्ज मार्शल जो थे, ही वाज सेक्रेटरी ऑफ स्टेट. उन्होंने एक प्लान को ड्राफ्ट किया, दैट इज नोन एज यूरोपियन रिकवरी प्रोग्राम. अंडर दिस यूरोपियन रिकवरी प्रोग्राम they gave around 12.5 to 13 billion dollars for around 4 years, and that is what is known as the European recovery program. Why this was done? Because this learned that until and unless there is an economic crisis, communism is not going to rise. उन्होंने ये कहा कि हम किसको हटाएंगे अब, इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस. दे वांटेड टू बिल्ड द इकोनॉमीज ऑफ वेस्टर्न यूरोपियन नेशन, और बहुत सारे यूरोपियन नेशन ने इसको एक्सेप्ट किया. एंड दैट्स व्हाई वी सी द क्रिएशन, वी सी द विक्ट्री ऑफ मार्शल प्लान. तो अराउंड 13 बिलियन डॉलर फॉर हाउ मेनी इयर्स, 4 इयर्स, उसके लिए इसको यूज किया गया. ठीक है. और इस पैसे को स्पेंड करने के लिए एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनाई गई, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ यूरोपियन इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन. ठीक है. जो बाद में विद द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम बिकेम OECD. तो क्या बन गई, OECD. आप IR में पढ़ोगे उनके बारे में. ठीक है, OECD के बारे में. जब यूएसए इस टाइप के स्टेप्स ले रहा था, तो काउंटर केम फ्रॉम वेयर, द काउंटर केम फ्रॉम सोवियत यूनियन. जैसे ही उन्होंने अपना मार्शल प्लान लेके आए, इनका कौन सा प्लान है, मोल्टो प्लान. ठीक है. सो मोल्टो, ही वाज द फॉरेन मिनिस्टर. उन्होंने एक अपनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन भी बनाई बाय द नेम ऑफ कॉमिनफॉर्म टू यूनिफाई यूरोपियन कम्युनिस्ट पार्टीज. कॉमिकॉन बनाया गया फॉर म्यूचुअल इकोनॉमिक असिस्टेंस. एंड द मार्शल प्लान वाज सीन लाइक अ डॉलर इंपीरियलिज्म. उसको एक काउंटर करने वाले थे. तो इस तरीके से जो है कोल्ड वॉर आगे बढ़ता है. ठीक है. ड्यूरिंग द बर्लिन ब्लॉकेड एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बनाई जाती है जिसको हम क्या बोलते हैं, नाटो. ठीक है. So in April 1949, the Western power thought that they do not have any sound mechanism to fight. So that's why they said कि अब हम क्या करते हैं, एक तरीके से इसको आगे ले जाने के लिए साथ में एक ट्रीटी साइन कर लेते हैं. 2-3 ट्रीटी पहले ही साइन हो रखी थी. एक ट्रीटी जिसको हम बोलते हैं ट्रीटी ऑफ डनकर्क. डनकर्क वाज अ ट्रीटी साइन इन 1947 बिटवीन ब्रिटेन एंड फ्रांस. उसके बाद साइन होती है ब्रुसेल्स ट्रीटी इन 1948, जिसमें ये बेनेलक्स कंट्रीज की सारी साथ में आ जाती हैं विद स्पेन एंड फ्रांस. 1949 में साइन होती है नॉर्थ अटलांटिक ट्रीटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. इसको हम क्या बोलते हैं, नाटो. नाटो का काम क्या था, अगेन इट वाज बेस्ड अपॉन द कांसेप्ट ऑफ कलेक्टिव सिक्योरिटी. और काम एक ही था, दैट इफ देयर इज एनी अटैक, if there is any attack on them, it will be an attack on all of them. किसी भी एक कंट्री को आप अगर अटैक करोगे, it will be attack on all of them. Right? इसको काउंटर करने के लिए यूएसएसआर केम आउट विद वॉरशॉ पैक्ट, और इसको काउंटर किया. ठीक है. काफी सारी बाकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन भी बनी, जैसे कि साउथ ईस्ट एशिया ट्रीटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन लेड बाय यूएस, सेंट्रल ट्रीटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, ठीक है, जो मिडिल ईस्ट में बनाई इन्होंने, है ना. तो पूरा का पूरा इन्होंने कोशिश किया, एंड नंबर ऑफ थिंग्स वर डन. तो उन्होंने प्रोपेगेंडा बहुत सारा यूज किया. ठीक है. spread their ideas from one part to another. For espionage, CIA was created by USA. This was founded by KGB. हमने बात कर लिया already. The espionage भी हुआ इनके लिए. Principle of brinkmanship was used, which means that we should use जैसे पंजा लड़ाते हैं ना, ठीक है, arm wrestling. That is nothing but that is the meaning of brinkmanship, where you are just trying to put enough pressure on your adversary so that they give up, they fight. ये भी एक प्रिंसिपल है जो यूज हुआ ड्यूरिंग द कोल्ड वॉर. सरोगेट वॉर, कोरियन वॉर, वियतनाम वॉर, बहुत सारे वॉर हुए, है ना, एन नंबर ऑफ वॉर. इसी को काउंटर करने के लिए कुछ कंट्रीज ने क्या बनाया, नॉन अलाइंड मूवमेंट. They realized that if we will also get embroiled in these two war camps, it will not be useful for us. इससे क्या होगा, हमारी भी जो डेवलपमेंट है वो क्या हो जाएगी, स्टॉप हो जाएगी. एंड टू ensure कि भाई ऐसा ना हो, तो उन्होंने क्या बनाया, नैम बनाया. इंडिया इसका मेजर पार्ट था, ठीक है। अलॉन्ग विद इंडिया वी हैड इंडोनेशिया, डॉक्टर सुकर्नो। वी ऑल्सो हैड दिस यूगोस्लाविया with Joseph Tito. We had Egypt also, where we had the president Nasser, and we also had the prime minister from Ghana by the name of Kwame Nkrumah. All those they came together. पहले इन लोगों ने 1955 में Bandung कॉन्फ्रेंस की थी, and 1961 they had the first summit at Belgrade. And this is how we see the creation of NAM. तो जो कोल्ड वॉर है ना, ब्रॉडली इसके अगर हम फेजेस की बात करें, द फर्स्ट फेज इज फ्रॉम 47 1953. Second phase is from 53 to 1962. Third phase is from 1962 to 1979. Fourth phase is from 1979 to 1985. And the last phase is from 1985 to 1991. तो ब्रॉडली कितने फेज है कोल्ड वॉर के? 5 फेज है, ठीक है। 5 फेजेस आर देयर। मतलब चलिए इनके बारे में बात करते हैं, किस तरीके से ये फेजेस चलेंगे। तो फर्स्ट के बारे में मोस्टली बात करते थे 47 टू 53, ठीक है। 47 टू 53 क्यों? विद द कमिंग ऑफ द ट्रूमन डॉक्ट्रिन। ट्रूमन डॉक्ट्रिन आता है और साथ में कौन सा प्लान आता है? मार्शल प्लान। दे आर एबल टू रिवाइव द इकोनॉमीज ऑफ वेस्टर्न यूरोप, ठीक है। एंड फाइनली ये एंड कहाँ होता है? 1953 में, विद द एंड ऑफ कोरियन वॉर। 1953 से जो फेज शुरू था उसको बोलते थॉ। थॉ मतलब रिश्तों के बीच में जो एक होती है ना खटास, को कम थॉ, ठीक है। THAW। जब आइस पिघल जाती है तो उसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? थॉ। दैट केम इन 1953। 1953 के बाद काफी ऐसी ट्रीटीज साइन करी गई जिससे लग रहा था कि शायद इनके बीच की हॉस्टिलिटी कम हो जाएगी। क्या क्या है वो? प्लीज ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट। जैसे कि ऑस्ट्रिया जो है उसको एक सिंगल कंट्री बना दिया जाता है। ऑस्ट्रिया वाज आल्सो डिवाइडेड लाइक जर्मनी इनटू 4 पार्ट्स, जैसे जर्मनी थी, बट उन्होंने साइन कर लिया। ऑस्ट्रियन स्टेट ट्रीटी वाज साइंड बाय यूएस। सेकंड, during this phase many other development also happened which were now indicating towards war. जैसे कि वियतनाम वॉर एंड हुआ, ठीक है। वियतनाम वॉर एंड होने वाला था, बट अगेन साइड बाय साइड व्हाट डिड वी सी? बिगिनिंग ऑफ अदर अलायंसेस। जैसे वॉरशो पैक्ट साइन कर लिया किसने? यूएसएसआर ने। Similarly, in 1962, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. In fact, the biggest crisis which could have happened on this earth was Cuban Missile Crisis. Why Cuban Missile Crisis is so prominent? Because see this, Cuban Missile Crisis. What happened? There was a dictator by the name of Batista. WWE देखिए, देखिए, there was a dictator by the name of Batista. This dictator was overthrown, and the person responsible for that was Fidel Castro. So Fidel Castro came to power, socialist person. सबसे ज्यादा दिक्कत किसको होगी? यूएसए। तो यूएसए ने एक इन्वेजन कराने की कोशिश की बाय द यूज ऑफ CIA। दिस इज नोन एज द बे ऑफ पिग्स इन्वेजन। 1961 में ये कराने की कोशिश, बट फिडेल कास्ट्रो को पता चल गया, एंड इवेंचुअली फिडेल कास्ट्रो वाज एबल टू डिफीट द इन्वेजन ऑफ यूएस। यूएस की इन्वेजन को उन्होंने डिफीट कर। इसके बाद शुरू होता है नया गेम। फिडेल कास्ट्रो जाके मिलते हैं यूएस के, कहते हैं जी मुझे प्रोटेक्ट करो, एंड फॉर प्रोटेक्शन यूएसएसआर सेज कि ठीक है, हम आपके यहाँ लगाते हैं न्यूक्लियर मिसाइल। सीधा न्यूक्लियर मिसाइल लगाना चालू कर दिया। बट दिस इंफॉर्मेशन वाज सीन और दिस वाज अंडरस्टूड बाय द यूएस। उनके कुछ स्पाई प्लेन थे, उन्होंने देख लिया तो भाई यहाँ पे न्यूक्लियर जो है मिसाइल्स का इंस्टॉलेशन चल रहा है। So the ships of the USSR they were encircled by USA. लग रहा था कि भाई न्यूक्लियर वॉर हो सकता है वेरी इजीली, बट फाइनली द कॉमन सेंस प्रिवेल्ड एंड साइन किया गया तो भाई आगे से हमेशा एक दूसरे से पहले बात करेंगे। तो प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ यूएसए एंड प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ यूएसए उनके बीच में एक हॉटलाइन बनाई गई। बेवकूफ़ों कम से कम लड़ाई से पहले एक बार बात कर लिया, ठीक है। यूएन ने आके काफी नेगोशिएट किया। लग रहा था ना कि सीधा अगर मान लीजिए न्यूक्लियर वॉर हो जाता कहानी खत्म हो जाती, आफ्टर 1962 a phase comes in जिसको हम बोलते हैं डेटेंट। क्या बोलते हैं? डेटेंट। जो सेकंड फेज है इसको क्या बोलते हैं? इसको बोलते हैं डेटेंट। डेटेंट मीन्स मोर परमानेंट रिलैक्सेशन ऑफ टेंशन, जहाँ थोड़ा सा टेंशन कम हो गया। कैसे हुआ टेंशन कम इस फेज के अंदर? 62 सबसे पहले क्यूबन मिसाइल क्राइसिस को खत्म कर दिया गया, बाद में वियतनाम वॉर भी जो है वो एंड हो गया, इवन काफी सारी ट्रीटी साइन करी गई, स्ट्रेटेजिक आर्म्स लिमिटेशन ट्रीटी सॉल्ट बोलते हैं उसको, वो भी इस बीच में साइन करी गई। तो काफी ज्यादा रिलैक्सेशन हुआ टेंशन का। इनफैक्ट इवन यूरोपियन कंट्रीज रियलाइज कि भाई ये लड़ाई तो चल रही यूएस से और यूएसआर की, हम बीच में सैंडविच बने, तो हमें भी अपने हिसाब से क्या करना चाहिए, एक रिलेशनशिप ऐसा मेंटेन करना चाहिए कि भाई यूएसआर के साथ थोड़ा सा ओपन अप करना पड़े। दैट्स व्हाई टिल 1979 एक थोड़ा सा एक अच्छा माहौल बन चुका, बट 1979 onwards another phase came which is known as Second Cold War. During 1979 Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. तो अफगानिस्तान को उन्होंने इन्वेड किया इन 1979। जैसे ही अफगानिस्तान को इन्वेड किया इट लेड टू द बिगिनिंग ऑफ सेकेंड कोल्ड वॉर। बहुत चैलेंजेस शुरू हो गए। इनफैक्ट इट वाज एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम तालिबान किसने क्रिएट किया था? यूएसए। यूएसए क्रिएटेड तालिबान टू फाइट अगेंस्ट यूएसएसआर। वो उन्होंने कोशिश की उस टाइम फाइट करने की, एंड इट वाज बिकॉज ऑफ दिस द कोल्ड वॉर हॉस्टिलिटीज इंक्रीज मल्टीपल फोल्ड। 85 के बाद कहानी बिल्कुल चेंज हो जाती है। वी सी द विक्ट्री ऑफ मिखाइल गोर्बाचेव इन द इलेक्शंस। He came out with an open heart, okay, and he was someone who was a believer in two policies, glasnost and perestroika. Glasnost means openness, ठीक है, बिकॉज कम्युनिस्ट सिस्टम क्या होते हैं? ओपेक होते हैं बहुत। इस अब से हम क्या करेंगे? ओपन करेंगे अपनी सारी चीजों। सेकंड, पेरेस्ट्रोइका। पेरेस्ट्रोइका मीन्स रीस्ट्रक्चर। अब क्या करेंगे? पूरी अपनी पॉलिटी और इकोनॉमी की रीस्ट्रक्चरिंग शुरू करेंगे। He went and even met the US President Ronald Reagan at this point of time कि भाई चलो हम क्या करते हैं, बंद करते हैं काम। धीरे धीरे करके उन्होंने काफी रिडक्शन किया हॉस्टिलिटी को। दे लेफ्ट अफगानिस्तान, एक उससे पॉजिटिव फैक्टर डेवलप हुआ। देयर आफ्टर ही ऑल्सो अलाउड द यूनिफिकेशन ऑफ जर्मनी। बर्लिन वॉल जो बनाई गई थी 1961 में, ठीक है, उसको तोड़ दिया गया बाय 1989। बहुत सारे रिपब्लिक्स थे, पोलैंड, रोमानिया, बल्गारिया, हर जगह कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी हारने लग गई स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम 1989। ही डिड नॉट इंटरफेयर। ही सेड जो भी लोग चाहते हैं वो होने। बाय द एंड ऑफ 1990 ब्रॉडली कोल्ड वॉर की जो रिलेशनशिप थी वो चेंज हो चुकी, बट गोर्बाचेव he was not able to save the Soviet Union. Why? When he did these reforms, he did political and economic reforms at the same time. और वो सबसे बड़ी गलती थी। जो पॉलिटिकल क्लास वॉज अनहैप्पी, दो दो पार्ट में लोग डिवाइड हो गए। कुछ जो कंजर्वेटिव रहना चाहते थे और कुछ लोग जो ज्यादा रेडिकल थे, जैसे बोरिस येल्सिन। ही वांटेड इवन मोर पॉलिटिकल, ही वाज कॉट बिटवीन देम। देन इकोनॉमी, उन्होंने इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स करे, बट उससे क्या, जीडीपी कम हो गई, नेगेटिव ग्रोथ निकल गई। दैट्स व्हाई बिकॉज ऑफ ऑल दीज फैक्टर्स बाय 1991 सोवियत यूनियन कोलैप्स। मिखाइल गोर्बाचेव रिजाइंड एज हिज प्रेसिडेंट। सारी की सारी जो यूएसएसआर की ट्रीटीज थी वो सारी किसको पास ऑन कर दी गई? रशिया। रशिया वाज नाउ कंसीडर्ड एज द सक्सेसर ऑफ यूएसएसआर। बाय 1991 एवरीथिंग वाज ओवर, थिंग्स एंडेड। यहाँ पे कहानी क्या हो जाती है? खत्म हो जाती है हमारे कोल्ड वॉर की। तो बाद में जब हम पढ़ेंगे यूपीएससी ये सब क्वेश्चंस पूछ लेता है। व्हाट वर द इवेंट्स व्हिच लेड टू थॉ, आउटलाइन द सर्कमस्टांसेस लीडिंग टू डेथ एंड, और इवेल्युएट द रोल ऑफ मिखाइल गोर्बाचेव इन द डाउनफॉल ऑफ यूएसएसआर। चाइना के अंदर अगर आप देखेंगे, ठीक है, चाइना के अंदर अगर हम देखेंगे, चाइना के अंदर कैसे कम्युनिज्म कंटिन्यू। आज चाइना की अगर आप पॉलिटी देखोगे वो कम्युनिस्ट है, अगर इकोनॉमी देखोगे वो कैपिटलिस्ट। दोनों में बहुत डिफरेंस है। अगर इकोनॉमी देखोगे तो प्योर कैपिटलिज्म, पॉलिटी देखोगे तो वो प्योर कम्युनिज्म है। तो उन्होंने ये सीखा यूएसएसआर से, ये दोनों रिफॉर्म्स एक साथ में। तो 1980s से उन्होंने इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म स्टार्ट किए थे, एंड दीज रिफॉर्म्स कंटिन्यूड ऑल द वे अप टिल नाउ, बट इन्होंने आज तक पॉलिटिकल रिफॉर्म नहीं किया। दैट्स द रीजन फॉर द सर्वाइवल ऑफ चाइना एज ए कम्युनिस्ट कंट्री इन इट्स पॉलिटिकल स्ट्रक्चर। दैट्स द रीजन व्हाई यूएसएसआर फेल्ड। उन्होंने दोनों के दोनों रिफॉर्म्स एक साथ कर दिए थे। दैट वाज द वर्स्ट पॉसिबल डिसीजन। ठीक है, थोड़ा टॉपिक चाइना का भी कर लेते हैं ताकि एक एटलीस्ट सेंस ऑफ आइडिया फिनिश हो जाएगा। इफ यू सी द स्टोरी ऑफ चाइना, चाइना वाज अंडर द कंट्रोल ऑफ मंचू डायनेस्टी और किंग डायनेस्टी till 1911. It was dominated by the Western countries. In 1912, a republic was created in China. The person who was now leading it is Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Okay, so he was the leader. He was influenced by three ideas. First, he wanted rise of nationalism in China. Second, he wanted democracy. And third, he was influenced by the idea of land reforms. This was the role of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. Dr. Sun Yat-sen continued. He made this party known as KMT, Kuomintang KMT party. From 1912 till 1925, till he was alive, everything was smooth. It was going in one way. The communists also came. The Communist Party was formed by 1921. This party was able to work with KMT because the objectives of both the organizations was largely same. But the problem started from 1925 because Dr. Sun Yat-sen was now no more. Since he was no more, the next person who came into lead was Chiang Kai-shek. During the initial 2 years, he continued the alliance with the communists. But then, he started this movement of extermination, killing all the communists. So he began these extermination campaigns. This led to the beginning of civil war. From 1927 till 1936, it was KMT versus Communist Party of China. Continued. During the same phase, there was a time in which the communists were encircled by Chiang Kai-shek and they could have been finished off. At this point of time, Mao led this famous what is known as Long March. From southern part of China, he went towards the north part. Okay, that is known as Long March. Because of Long March, he was able to save communists. And he was able to have this relationship where they developed the relationship with all the peasants, majority of the peasants of the whole of China. And they gave them assurance if they will come to power, they will do land. वो सारी की सारी चीजें यहाँ पे होने लग गई। 1936 full-fledged war was on the verge with the Japanese. From 1937 till 1945, both these parties put aside their differences and they fought with Japan. ठीक है, जापान के साथ लड़ाई लड़ी उन्होंने 45 to 49. This was again an important phase. Mao became successful. 1st of October 1949, he declared the creation of People's Republic of China. Okay, and Chiang Kai-shek, he fled, he ran away to Taiwan. उन्होंने ताइवान क्रिएट कर लिया। तो आज भी इन्होंने के बीच में टसल चलती रहती है। दे हैव दिस वन चाइना पॉलिसी, जिसमें कहते हैं कि चाइना एक है, गवर्नमेंट क्या है, दो है, दिस इज वन चाइना पॉलिसी। बट नेचुरली इफ वी सी एट द पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, तो चाइना दो ही दिखते हैं, one of Chiang Kai-shek, the other of Mao, one capitalist, the second is communist, ठीक है, ये इनके बीच में डिवीजन है। यही ब्रॉडली देखो हमारे टॉपिक्स है वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री में। कुछ कुछ पार्ट रह गए जैसे कि इंपीरियलिज्म एंड कोलोनियलिज्म, तो वो थोड़े से इंपॉर्टेंट एरियाज हैं जो हम डिस्कस करेंगे कभी बाद में। अभी तो चलिए, सिंस वी आर लार्जली फोकसिंग, सिंस वी आर लार्जली फोकसिंग ऑन मेन टॉपिक्स, तो अभी के लिए हमारा एनसीईआरटी वाला जो पार्ट है वो फिनिश हो गया, ठीक है। Tomorrow we'll have the strategy session. All the questions that you have with respect to history option you can ask tomorrow. ठीक है, हर छोटी छोटी चीज को मैं डिस्कस करूंगा। कल सिलेबस को एक बार ठीक से डिस्कस करेंगे, सोर्सेज को डिस्कस करेंगे, फाउंडेशन प्रोग्राम में हमारा किस तरीके से चलेगा ये भी दिखाएंगे, भाई कब से कब तक टेस्ट वगैरह कब होंगे आपके, ठीक है, किस तरीके से आप लोग चलेंगे ताकि ऑप्शन में मैक्सिमम मार्क्स ले पाए, कहाँ से दो क्वेश्चन करने चाहिए एंशिएंट से कि मिडिएवल से, थोड़ा से क्वेश्चंस भी देखेंगे पिछले 2-3 साल के, तो वो एक तुम्हें एक ब्रॉड आइडिया है, मतलब इट विल गो टू क्रिएट मेच्योरिटी, ताकि आप शुरुआत की क्लासेस से ही थोड़ा सा कॉन्फिडेंस बना के पढ़ सकते, ठीक है। वो कल कर लेंगे, सेम टाइम विल मीट अराउंड 3। कल का सेशन थोड़ा छोटा ही रहेगा, 4:30 तक हम चले जाएंगे। मंडे से भाई वी विल स्टार्ट विद एंशिएंट इंडिया, तो फर्स्ट क्लास हमारी मंडे से चालू हो जाएगी, ठीक है।